Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Kevin Skellett. He's an award winning author, an ordained pastor, an advocate for suicide awareness and prevention, and a certified John C. Maxwell speaker and coach. He's
Mhm.
also the founder of Love Never Ends, a grief and loss ministry. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Yep. Thank you for having me, AJ. I'm looking forward to speaking today.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Kevin. And
Yeah.
I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit, will learn from you about grief and hope. And that is what, in this backdrop, we will have our conversation. A conversation which is a difficult conversation,
Mhm.
but this conversation will help a lot of people, and that is where you come in. And so, before we come into the conversation, let's understand a bit about your journey, your background, your story, so that people know who they are actually listening to.
Yeah. So I am in 2011. I lost my son to suicide, and that was definitely the worst day of my life. It was May 18th in 2011, and that morning I got a phone call from the police department. They wanted to speak with me, but they wouldn't tell me why, and I kept on asking them, what's this all about? Did I do something wrong? And finally, the police officer said, it's about your son, Mark, and we'll be there soon. And they hung up. And so, I was just left there trying to figure out what in the world is going on. Why the police calling about Mark? And I initially called his phone just to see, if he'd pick up and try to get some answers, but his phone went directly to his voicemail. So I had to figure out what is what's going on my own. And so I was thinking, if he was in an accident or if he was hurt, the police officer would probably told me what hospital he was at or where he was. And then I thought, well, maybe he's been arrested. But then I thought that Mark would probably be calling and not the police. And then I thought maybe he was being investigated for something, but that really wasn't his nature. He didn't get into that deep of trouble. He got in some trouble, but not something like that. So then finally, I got to the point where I said, "This is going to be a death notification," and I just really had to prepare myself for what was going to come. At the time, I was working for a technology company, and I was working remotely, so I was home by myself. My wife had already gone to work. My older son had gone to work, and my wife's younger son, he had gone to school. So I was there at the house all by myself, and just really just waiting for the police to arrive to find out, what was really going on. So that was a real tough morning. Um, I was also in the process of becoming a pastor, and so I was taking classes for my licensing and things. Uh, so really, my faith really was what really kicked in that morning. I had to, since I was alone, I really needed to bring someone into the conversation. So I just reached out to God and started praying, and that was probably the most intimate conversation I'd ever had with God was that morning. So.
Right, Kevin. Right. And this is something nobody, I feel very difficult to talk about
Mhm.
these things, and especially seeing somebody's loss. But, somewhere culturally, we are not prepared to talk much about these things. And a lot of people are like this. They
Yeah.
just find it so difficult to deal and talk about such things. And talking of, during that situation, trying to understand things, trying to get help from God, understand things. What is it that you talk to God? What is it that you asked of God? What is it that God came to you in what way? I want to understand from different people's perspective so that they can, everyone faces their difficult times in one
Mhm.
form or the other, so that they can look at God, get better answers for themselves during those times when nobody is giving them any clear answer.
Right. Yeah. So I didn't really know what to pray, and all I did was basically my prayer ended up being just what I knew at the time, or what I felt I knew at the time. I said, I just bowed my head and said, Father, my son is dead. And God immediately spoke back to me. I don't think it was audible, but it was certainly in my head, and I knew it was God. And He said, "My son died too. I know exactly how you feel." So that surprised me. One, to get an answer like that, and two, it was just feeling comfortable that the God that God knew my situation, and He was right there with me. But then He said something that really confused me. He said, "By the way, he's not your son." And I had to stop for a minute and think. And I said, "Well, I was there when he was born. He looks like me. I don't think there's any switching of babies at the hospital or anything like that." And so I'm just going through all these thoughts in my mind, trying to figure out, well, how is he not my son? And then after what seemed to be a long time, but it was probably just a few seconds, I heard God say, "He's my son. I gave him to you." And I was trying to think, well, what do you say to that? And the only thing I could think of was, I said, "Thank you, Father, for the time you gave me with Mark." So just in those few minutes, um, of just talking with God, He had brought me to a point of being thankful on the very worst day of my life. It was just an amazing, again, conversation. And then I think back on it, all the things that were in that conversation were just so powerful. But it also just kind of helped me really get through that day. I think just knowing that God was with me.
Right. And somehow I couldn't help but see the similarity in what who told you and what I read. And a lot of people talk about that in India. In Hindi, if I tell you, and then I'll translate to you, that about the same thing, that he's my son. In the same
Mm,
way that when Lord Shiva, people talk about, then about somebody who's alive and somebody who's not no more with us, is that जब आप जिंदा होते हैं, then I am within you,
mm,
and when you are no more, then you are within me.
yeah.
Same way, it's like as long as you are alive on this earth, I am within you,
Mm,
and after you leave this body of yours, you are within me. I see that, so some great deal of similarity there, and I guess these are the things that bring a better understanding of things to people. But realities do not change on the ground. You start seeing those things differently. What Where did you see it? Suicide is a difficult word. It is a very different sort of understanding, and one starts having so many things, reflects on things, what could have been done before, what could be taken care of, what were the signs and all. How did it all filter down in your mind, in your life? You were, as you said, you were all alone at home at that point in time. Help us understand the things after that, so that people can gain as much understanding of hope. Grief is there is a fact, but also hope in whatever way you could see it.
Yes. The police finally got there, and they had me come in and sit down at my kitchen table, and they told me the news that Mark had taken his life. And so that was very hard to hear, especially just because there's like a stigma that goes along with suicide and mental health and issues like that. And they also had me just identify his body from the photos and everything. So that was one of the other reasons why they were coming over. Um, the whole idea of the suicide piece, that was really, at first, we were looking at having a very private memorial service, just because we were ashamed of the suicide, and didn't really want a lot of people there, didn't want a lot of people to know. But Mark's friends uh, told us that they really wanted to be there, and they would really like it to have an open funeral service. And so Mark's mother and I talked, because we were divorced at the time, but we talked and we decided that we would open it up and have an open service for his friends and everything. So just that whole stigma of suicide almost took that away from his friends. And so just a little bit of background on Mark. He had when he was born, he had a condition called strabismus, which caused his eyes to cross very severely. And when he was 1 years old, he had a surgery that would help it, and it did. It helped it quite a bit. He always had glasses, and throughout his life, he if he got real tired or something, his eyes would cross a little bit, or one eye would turn in. So he tended to get picked on a lot, just because of those things. Um, and again, I said that Mark's mom and I were divorced. He really favored his mom uh, over me a lot of times. But when we split up, he was supposed to go live with his mom, and his brother was going to live with me. But things didn't work out, so he had to come live with me, and he wasn't so happy about that initially. But then we were able to really work on our relationship a lot better after that. So that was just another stressor, the divorce. Um, and then he was in a 6-year relationship with his girlfriend. They were living together. Mark was 21 at the time of his death, and they broke up 2 weeks before he took his life. And I don't blame her at all, because I think Mark was a little bit abusive to her. He had some sort of mental health condition. He'd gone to the doctor one time, and the doctor suggested he go see a psychiatrist, and he did, and he prescribed him some medication to help him. That seemed to work for a while, but then Mark decided he didn't really like the way it made him feel, so he stopped taking the medication, stopped going to see the psychiatrist. And he would have mood swings that would go. He can go from being real happy to being really angry in just a matter of seconds. So I'm thinking he had some type of bipolar disorder is probably what he was dealing with. And he couldn't really control his emotions sometimes, or they would just accelerate out of control. And his girlfriend was the receiving end of a lot of that sometimes. So I don't blame her for breaking up with him or anything like that. But he seemed. I saw him 5 days before he took his life, and he seemed really happy at the time. And I think that this is just one of those strange things about suicide. It's the signs of suicide that some people, you're not going to pick up on, I don't think. There's a lot of it's easy when you know that someone is dealing with a mental health issue, or they're in extreme pain. But Mark was real happy at that time, and he seemed like he had gotten over things. He had plans to go visit his friends. He had plans for his future, and he sounded like he was in a really good place. What I determined afterwards, after I had learned more about the signs of suicide, is I believe that Mark had made his decision that he was going to take his life. So he was happy because his pain was going to end at some time very soon. So he just knew his pain was going to end. So he was a much better place. He went to visit his friends to say goodbye to them. And actually, he was saying goodbye to me that night, I believe. Because one of the things I always wanted to know from Mark is how he viewed me as a father. And that night before he left, he said, "I haven't always been a good son, but you've always been a great father to me." And I was surprised by that, and it was just that kind of added to my joy of seeing him that day, and really thinking that he's not thinking about suicide. Um, when he went to visit his friends, he was again saying goodbye, but he also took some of his prized possessions, and he gave some of his prized possessions away. That's another sign of suicide, is giving away prized possessions. And so those three signs, the going to say goodbye, the giving away prized possessions, and the just the happy attitude because he had already made a decision. I think that those were all signs that I didn't see. I didn't have any idea about. I didn't even want to talk about suicide at the time because I thought I'd put an idea in his head, and that's one of the big myths is that you really need to talk about it, and they're looking for someone to talk about it with them so they can start getting out some of the feelings that they have, because most people don't really want to kill themselves. They just want to end the pain, whether it's mental pain or physical pain that they're experiencing. So those were some of the things I saw leading up to his death. Afterwards, um, the service was probably the biggest thing. Um, After that conversation with God, I just felt God was really telling me to speak at the service. That wasn't something that I was wanted to do, and not something I imagined myself doing. But he kept on putting ideas and words in my head, so I didn't even have to write anything down. I knew everything I needed to say. It was just in my head. And so when I did, I got up there to speak. And at the end, one of the things that he had me do is reach out to Mark's friends. And I told them that if they ever see me out anywhere, to come up and just tell me stories about my son. And at the end of the service, I'd gone outside and getting ready to go over to a reception we were having. And one of Mark's friends came up and told me a story about Mark. And then another friend came up and told me a story about Mark. And then all of a sudden, I had a line of about 30 of his friends outside, all waiting to tell me a story about Mark. And that was probably one of the biggest um, uh, parts of my healing right there, is just hearing story after story about how Mark had helped his friends. And that's what he did. He got one of them a refrigerator. He gave a couple a shower for their wedding. He visited one of his friends that was playing in a band, I think, and but Mark was the only friend that showed up, But that was the kind of friend that he was. That he was always helping people, and I always wondered where all my money went that I was giving to Mark, and I found out a lot of where that money was going that morning. But it was, that really helped in the healing process. Um, Another thing that helped is that I was starting a ministry at the time for recovery, um, really all types of recovery. And part of that is just to, have uh, a time where you can just talk about what's on your mind. And so every week I had a safe place to go and talk about my grief. And so that was so powerful, just being able to have that. A lot of people don't have that. They keep all that grief inside. And the only way you can process it is to either speak about it, write about it, just get it out of your system, because grief is so strong, especially if, it all depends on the love that you've had for that person. Um, the more love you have, the more grief you're going to have afterwards if you lose them. And it just takes so much time and so much um, change in your life to go ahead and work through that grief. So, but I was lucky to have those opportunities to speak about my grief each and every week for, I've been doing it now for over 13 years, having opportunities to speak about grief and hopefully be able to help others in the process as well.
Right, Kevin. Right. You talk about suicide awareness, you talk about suicide prevention.
Yes.
And when you have situations like this, when things are happening in real life, you
Hmm.
just find it difficult, especially if they are close ones to you, to intervene at what point in time, because there is this private space also. You don't see our things, you interpret things differently, and you don't know if someone would like you to intervene at in their space.
Hmm.
But later on, it can lead to regret that you did. How should people look at these different signs, which can be very normal signs? Even normal
Hmm.
people sometimes mostly behave like that, and look at the deeper things that perhaps might be going on. Every time we may not know about the mental difficulties, mental health of the loved ones, even of those whom we are staying with. How,
Hmm.
what would you like to tell all those people who who may have people around them
Hmm.
but not know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, if you see some signs of suicide, and that could be just the way a person is speaking or posting on social media, it's, saying just very negative things about themselves, or you won't have to worry about me very much longer, or I won't be here to worry about that. You see things like that, uh, hear them speaking that or seeing that on social media. Um, I would highly recommend reaching out to them and being very direct. Uh, One of the things that we teach in suicide prevention is to ask the question. And the question is, are you thinking about suicide, or are you thinking about killing yourself? And you have to say it in those direct words. Um, if you say something like, are you thinking about harming yourself? Well, the person may be thinking that, well, suicide is going to end the pain that I'm feeling. It's going to end the harm that I'm feeling. And I'm not harming myself. I'm just trying to end this pain that I have. And so they can say no to that and be truthful. But if you ask them about if you're thinking about suicide or you're thinking about killing yourself, um, that's a question that they have to answer. And a lot of times when you ask that question, I know it's a really hard question to ask, and it's certainly much easier for me to ask because I've done it many times. But that first time is very difficult. Um, but when you do, you a lot of times you'll see a sign of relief in the person because they feel like finally I've been heard. Someone sees that I'm thinking about this, and they're able to talk about it. Um, Hopefully, the person says no, and then you can just move on. But if they do say yes, that they are thinking about suicide, there's certain things that you want to do. One, you want to keep them safe, and then you want to be there for them. So you want to continue to ask some questions to find out where they are. Um, you want to ask, do you have a plan to take your life? And if they have a plan, do they have a means? So, have they purchased a weapon, or they have some drugs, or whatever they're going to do? Um, and if they have all that, then you want to get someone else involved. So I know here in the United States, we've got a suicide prevention lifeline, 988. I don't know what other countries have specifically, but reaching out to uh, a mental health professional, or if they've got a counselor or therapist that they work with, reaching out to them. That's always the next step that you want to do, is bring someone else in and get the help that they need. And then you want to stay with them and connect with them, because they've probably formed a connection with you, just to continue to check up on them, just make sure they get to a safe place, and that that they are in a safe place for the immediate future. That may require calling, the authorities to come in. I know in the United States, a lot of them have a crisis intervention training, and so they know how to work that. But you never want to leave that person alone if they say they have a plan and they are thinking about suicide.
Right, right, Kevin. So when someone shares so deeply about all these things to another person, unknown, maybe known also, what is it that they are wanting from you? Do they need help by actually telling the truth? Or is it that they are just telling the truth because you asked about it?
It probably is a little bit of both. Hopefully, if you ask the question, they'll give you a truthful answer. But again, I think that a lot of times they're putting signs out there just to get some help, or to be noticed. Maybe people have just been ignoring them for a long time, and that's part of their pain, and they're just looking for someone to really listen to them. And so by asking questions about them, and why are you thinking about suicide, um, and just let them say everything that's going on in their minds and in their hearts, and what pain they're feeling, and they just really want to be heard a lot of times. And they may not have access to mental health resources, or maybe it's their family is what the problem is, and they don't have anyone safe to talk there. But if they can find someone to talk to, that usually is a good step in the right direction.
Right. So this is about two people. One is the one who has plans of this sort and the
Hmm.
one who is trying to help. What about individual who is feeling this sort of thing and they want help,
Hmm.
but obviously everyone will not get someone who will ask them about what their plans are about this. What is it that they can do to help themselves? There are so
Okay.
many advice about this, but I want to understand from you so that if they need help and they want help, but they are hesitant to seek because they don't know or they want someone to come to them rather than reaching. What would you like to tell them so that they get motivated to reach out rather than waiting for someone?
Yeah. If you've been putting signs out there, the thing you need to do is just be real clear. I would, you know, reach out to someone that you trust or someone that you know, and just tell them what you're thinking and tell them the pain that you're feeling. Um, don't try to mask it with just words that kind of suggest where you are. Just be real and be vulnerable and talk about it to somebody so that they can help you get help. That's the most powerful thing that you can do to help yourself. Um, if there is nobody there, you can always go talk to a stranger if you have to, but just talk to somebody and keep talking to somebody until you get the help that you need.
Right. Right. You founded Love Never Ends Grief and Loss Ministry after your youngest
Yeah.
son's incident. Tell us about this. What is its role into all these things?
Yeah, I felt that God really wanted me to help others who are going through grief. So initially, Love Never Ends was a ministry for parents who had lost a child, and so we did that for a couple of years just for that. And so I've got a lot of resources online at my website of www.loveneverendsministry.org. And so there's articles on there, there's resources. We do both online and in person workshops and groups. And so that's there to just help people to deal with their grief. In fact, I did a live workshop last night just here in the United States getting ready for the holidays because grief in the holidays can be really tough. And so this first of this year, I had so many people who are grieving other things than just the loss of a child that really wanted to participate. So I moved it over to more of a open, any type of loss or grief to be part of the ministry. So we do invite anyone to come and be involved in those groups or the online groups. And I've altered the resources so they're not specific to losing a child, and hopefully they can help a lot of people. I also have written a book called Grace's Grief After Suicide Loss, and that's one of the resources I have on the website. But that book really goes through my journey and also has a lot of at the end of each chapter it has a series of questions to help a person go through that aspect of their grief on their own and really ask them some tough questions to help them move forward in their grief. So,
Right. Right. Let's talk about the role of the community. Many a times people at one point in time or the other feel that there is nobody around them.
mm,
And there is a whole community around us. Where individually we all think we are all alone. But when we get together, we feel that strength. How should the community play a more active role in these things? In terms of suicide prevention, in terms of grief recovery. Uh, should they wait for the individual to come in, or there is a better way for the community to reach out? Especially, when they know that individually we are so vulnerable, so weak in our own ways, that if they get company, we know of groupings, but many a time when you are alone, you just don't find anyone around you. How
yeah.
should then the community become much more visible for such people, either in grief or either in terms of suicide prevention?
Yeah, if you're looking from the person's perspective, someone who is grieving or someone who is thinking about suicide. Eh, Unfortunately, at least I know in the culture in the United States, a lot of times you have to reach out to others yourself. You have to initiate that. I've determined that. I know that in my own grief, I had a lot of support up until the memorial service was over. But then afterwards, it seemed like people were avoiding me. I don't know if it was because I'd lost a child or because I was grieving or because people didn't know what to say. And so that was probably my most alone time was those first several months right after the funeral service. Um, and eventually I had to be the one to reach out to other people and just let them know it's okay to say Mark's name. It's okay to talk to me. It's okay to ask questions. Because I was okay with that. I wanted to talk about it. I know some people don't want to talk about it and would rather isolate for a little while, and that's good as long as they don't isolate for too long. Because being by yourself and isolating is never a good thing. It gets you in bad places. Um, so yeah, if you're going through that, then having the courage and strength to reach out to others is important. From a community perspective, if you know someone has lost somebody, and it's beyond the memorial service and things, just reach out and check on them, and just go over and just be there for them, to be that listening ear. That's the most powerful thing that you can do. Just allow them to speak. Don't try to fix them. Don't try to help them unless they specifically ask for some help. They'd probably just want somebody to listen to them. You have to have that good ear that can hear the pain that they're going to talk about, um, and just be able to listen to it. But that's probably the best thing that you can do for somebody who has lost somebody.
Right, Kevin. Right. My last question to you is to understand you try and spread this awareness about suicide prevention.
Yes.
What challenges are there in terms of this awareness spreading? You must be facing your own challenges.
Uh, yes, it's when I'd speak about it, certainly it brings back the memories of Mark and those type of memories. I'm also a police chaplain, so I end up going to police scenes where someone may have just died by suicide, and the family members are there, and I'm there to help comfort them and to work with them, and that always brings back those memories. I think one of the other difficult things from a suicide prevention, we teach classes, hold classes all the time, but we just don't get a lot of people that come to them. It's not a subject people generally want to uh, learn about or feel comfortable with. I know that mental health and suicide are those two things. They are gaining a lot more traction. We're getting a lot more people talking about mental health and talking about uh, you know trying to suicide prevention and things, but there's still a long ways to go. So just getting the word out there, finding audiences that will want to hear your message and want to learn more, that's the big challenge for us as we try to teach more people about mental health and about suicide awareness and prevention.
Right. There is much to learn and understand about these things,
Yes.
Mark, and I know it can be so difficult for to go through your loss. It reminds you every time you talk about these things, but still trying to help the community, trying to help as many people as possible. So, for those people who would want to connect with you, learn more about your story, and also get your help in whatever way they can, or
Mhm.
help you spread awareness in the things that you are doing, what's the best way for them to connect with
Well, if they go to the website, the www.loveneverendsministry.org, and there's a contact button on there, and that will go right directly to me. So that's the best way to reach out to me personally. And they can also, again, sign up for resources and join our subscription list, and they would get some updates and things on a regular basis as well.
you? Right. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.